Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gabby Petticrew, and welcome to this episode of Recruit Military Live. Today, we will be discussing the value of hiring veterans. And what better day to do that, seeing that yesterday was just National Hire a Veteran Day. And today, to assist me in speaking on today's topic, is a very special guest. He is a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel who's one of the nation's leading experts in career transition for veterans and public service professionals. He coaches individuals on their transition efforts and advises employers on hiring programs designed to successfully assimilate these valuable talent pools. He's the author of the best-selling and award-winning HarperCollins book, Mission Transition, a practical guide for veterans in career transition, their families, and their employers. His forthcoming book, Hiring Veterans, will be published by Career Press in September. Please join me in a warm welcome for Matt Lewis. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thanks, Gabby. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you having me and looking forward to the conversation.
Of course. Thank you so much. So today, I know one of the major topics out there, and this is a very popular one amidst veterans as well, is veteran myths. There is such a misunderstanding in today's society about what service members bring to the table after they leave the military. Having just written a book about hiring veterans, what are a few you find most employers cling to?
Well, Gabby, appreciate the question. And it's something that I surfaced in many times in writing my current book, Hiring Veterans, as you mentioned. And if I can boil it down, and I prepared a few slides, Gabby, if we could pivot to those, I'll share my screen here just to run through some of the myths I encountered as I was out facilitating case studies with a number of companies that are out there. One is all around education. There tends to be a myth out there that veterans are less educated than their civilian peers, the peers rather. Fact is, they're more, and whether you use high school degree as the metric or graduate or other advanced degree, where veterans are 160% more likely to have a graduate or advanced degree. And by the way, have 3 times more work experience than non-veterans. They come from a pool, I've circled there, the typical set that most organizations are focused on hiring. This is a chart that simply shows that in comparison to their civilian peers, they have exquisite amounts of training experience in various roles. Another myth out there is that everyone in the military serves in a combat arms capacity. I was one of those, unfortunately, but they think everyone is. Fact of the matter is 15% or less serve in that combat specialty. Flip that around, 88.5% serve in a specialty that is directly accredited to some function in a civilian equivalent organization. And by the way, bonus fact, that security clearance you have is valuable in the real world, and the military happens to be the largest entity that has individuals with those. Another myth out there is that, well, if they're in the military, they surely must have PTSD. Fact of the matter is, most organizations, actually in any organization, has 5 times the number of civilians that have PTSD than veterans. So I'll just do the quick math to show you. Here's the pie chart. Here's the stats. Just to run you through it real quickly, again, all based on statistics. In a notional 1,000-person organization, 6% of the labor pool is made up of vets, so 60 veteran employees. Of that, studies tell us 11 to 20% of post 9/11 vets have PTSD. Let's take the high end of that just to be conservative. That gives us 12 veteran employees that have PTSD. Let's flip that around. Those 1,000 minus 660 vets gives us 940 civilian employees. Studies also say that 7 to 8% of the adult U.S. population has PTSD. After all, civilians get PTSD too. Think car crashes, sexual trauma, any number of things that might trigger it. Let's take the low end of that range. So 70% of 940 is 66. So more than 5 times of the civilians in your organization have PTSD. There's a myth out there around diversity. Fact of the matter is, military is exceptionally diverse. At the end of the day, when you hire veterans, you hire diversity and you hire success. On diversity here, 31% of the military is made up of racial and ethnic minority groups. it's a plug and play. Another myth out there is around disability accommodation. The myth is all veterans are disabled and they all require accommodations. Again, fact is most veterans don't require accommodations, and almost 60% of them don't cost anything. A couple more here real quickly. A complaint, one of the chief complaints I got from employers rather, in doing the book is, I can't find veterans. They're not plentiful. The fact of the matter is, if you know where to look, and there's a whole chapter devoted to that, there's 200,000 matriculating from the service every single year. They're available year round, unlike folks coming off of campuses that are only available at those matriculation or graduation dates. Last one I'll end with here. There's a myth that hiring veterans, it really has no impact. Why should I bother? Is kind of what some employees tend to say. Well, it's impactful on a couple reasons here. One, from a positive standpoint, within their own business, if they successfully pose themselves and their brand in the face of the military community, that military community is made up of 37 million individuals that wield 1.2 trillion in buying power. You might want to make sure your brand is viewed kindly by them. And then the other key point is, if you put together a hiring program that includes veterans as part of a diverse group, you're going to increase your productivity by 22%, have 13 times higher mean cash flow, 4 times more able to deal with personnel problems, and 3 times more likely to identify and build leaders. It's incredibly important. The other outcome that I would point to is the fact that hiring veterans has a direct and quantifiable impact on national security. In light of today's recruiting crisis going on in pretty much all the services, except perhaps yours, Gabby, in the Marines, if veterans aren't seen as having successful careers post-service, think of the 16, 17-year-olds out there today looking at this. They may be dissuaded from serving. If vets aren't getting jobs, why would I, as a 16, 17-year-old, raise my right hand? So it's less a matter of national security. Even more directly, if veterans aren't employed, guess who pays the unemployment bill? It's the Department of Defense.
Exactly.
And that payment comes directly out of DoD's operating budget that pulls from funds that would otherwise be spent training the troops and on our common defense. So we'll stop sharing there, Gabby, but
Sure.
That's the answer to your question about some key things that employers should understand.
Of course. No, thank you for hitting on those. Actually, almost every single one of those myths, as a veteran myself and my veteran community, my military community, we've heard each and every single one of those. So thank you for pointing those out and mentioning things that prove that those are exactly just that, myths. So speaking on those, how do you offset those myths? What do you tell businesses is the value of the talent pool represented by today's military community, given those vets, military spouses, military dependents?
Right. Yeah. So you heard me just quote any number of statistics there. In addition to those, I point to a couple things. And again, if I could just share a slide or two to hammer this home. And by the way, you'll note, as I both in my book and the things I quote here, none of this is just hearsay. It's opinion. Everything that I write about and talk about and put in front of employers, it's based in fact. It's based in studies. And so here I'm referencing some studies done by IVMF at Syracuse University. If anyone's taken advantage of Onward Opportunity, you know exactly what I'm talking about. These are the business value that they have documented and have gone on to document in some studies that were done with HR leaders across all segments of industry. The fact of the matter is, these studies show that veterans at the end of the day are promoted faster, perform better, and are easier to manage than their non-veteran peers. Now I want to be careful with that, even though that's proven, and this is what the HR people that actually hire and promote individuals within their organization say. I want to make sure that we're not posing an us versus them dynamic, because ultimately, as service members matriculating into the corporate world, the real world, as it were, you have to, in order to successfully get promoted, you have to assimilate properly. And that involves building a new peer set beyond your tribe of veterans, if you will, fellow veterans that would be in the organization. So that's something you have to do. One other thing that I like to highlight here in answering this question is this slide here. Again, well documented by studies. The fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, what employers cite as being critical in terms of skill sets needed for success in the workplace reflects exactly what military service members bring to the table by virtue of their experience in the military today. And you can see those skills and those competencies documented on the chart itself. The difficulty that veterans have is in how to translate what they've done, be it in that combat arms capacity, again, I was one of those, or in some other function, and translating that as to how that fits in the real world. But we can tackle that in another question. So, Gabby, back to you.
Perfect. So if employers buy into that, how should they go about exactly hiring these veterans and military spouses? Because that seems to be the big problem, or the big hurdle, is actually getting the attention of how. Am I coming in? Can you hear me there, Matt?
You're breaking up a little bit. I think you're asking about how employers should go about hiring veterans, assuming they understand the value of them, right? Okay. So what I tell them,
Exactly.
again, I've just written a whole book on this and looking forward to it coming out. But if I kind of boil it down to the handful of secrets to success, the bottom line table stakes things that employers need to do to be successful in bringing on this incredibly valuable talent pool. First, and frankly, this would go for any talent initiative in an organization, but specific to a veteran organization, it needs to have top-down buy-in and top-down action, not just talking the talk, but walking the talk. And what I mean by this is the senior most executives in the organization leading the way, talking about it, putting in place systems, resources, processes to enable this to take place. And the larger the organization, the more important this is, because the larger the organization, you tend to have a bit more bureaucracy, and change, as we know, is difficult, period. The larger the organization, the more difficult the change is, and the more effort is going to need to be asserted from the top down to overcome that inertia. So one is just top down focus and leadership on behalf of those executives driving the effort or sponsoring the effort. Second, I would say kind of first step beyond that, and that's really the primary table stake. But once you have that, if you don't already have an existing veteran employment resource group, an ERG, that's something that the organization will want to develop. And that's important for a number of reasons. One, to bring together that tribe of veteran peers within the organization. But because of that, bringing those together, you're going to leverage that pool of individuals to help you with everything else that you're going to need to do to put in place all of the guts of the program that is going to take place. So one of those would be the third point around making sure you have onboarding materials and mentoring systems established. So members of that peer set are going to help you produce the curriculum you're going to need to help train and help those new veteran hires assimilate into the organization once they're there. And likewise, act as either buddies, if you will, peer mentors, or facilitate actual mentoring relationships that those incoming veterans would have with those higher up the chain within the organization. Those are two critical things, specifically the ERG group and the mentoring systems and programs that are critical to enabling those veterans to assimilate and stay on board beyond the 2-year mark, which is a critical waypoint. If you can get a veteran to stay on board within your new organization beyond 2 years, you have a much greater chance of being successful in retaining them over the long haul. I'd point to a couple more things in encouraging employers. One, and again, yes for this, but frankly for any program of this scale and scope, you want to make sure that the goals of the veteran hiring program are directly connected to your strategic goals of the organization. you want to make sure, both as an executive in the organization, but also the leader of this program, that whatever it is you're doing in this program is demonstrating success at the organizational level. You need to be able to demonstrate how, by this veteran hiring program being successful, it's going to move the needle at the organizational level for whatever that metric is, whether it's revenue growth, productivity, you name it. There has to be some outcome measure that your veteran hiring program helps drive at that next higher level in order to demonstrate success. The last thing I'll mention is just around compliance. And because you're hiring a protected work class with veterans, you're going to, these executives and members that are leading these programs, they need to make sure that they're in compliance with any sort of regulatory obligations. And there's a bunch of regulations out there. I'll just, USERA, VEVRA, EDA, FEMLA. There's a number of them. Even more so if you're a contractor serving the federal workforce. There's an annual compliance that you need to make sure that you're in touch with. Then the last thing I might add is around the fact that I wrote the book. I'm hanging myself out there as someone that is willing to help these executives put these programs in place. So if executives are still struggling with where and how to do this, I would be more than happy to help them out. So as it looks like Gabby's having some connectivity issues, so I'll kind of keep things rolling here. Apologies for that. We just talked to date about hiring veterans and how organizations need to prepare and how they should best execute that, at least at a summary table stakes level. I know there's probably a good many veterans on the call today too. Let me speak to you just a little bit, and what I'll do, if this will allow me to share some slides. It's looking like it's not. So a couple things I want to make sure veterans understand in coming out of the service. One is the challenge that you'll need to overcome. And when Gabby comes back, I'll share some slides to document with you what the civil military divide is and what that challenge represents for you in making your way from time in the military to time in your optimal future, fully employed in an optimal career field when you leave the military. So I'll circle back and I'll cite any number of statistics and studies to document what that is. And it's probably more significant than you may realize. Beyond that, then it becomes a question of, how should you, as veterans, hey, Sean, how you doing?
Doing great. Sorry about that. We're having technical difficulties with Gabby, so I'm going to jump right in and continue the conversation. I just had a quick question that I was thinking. You mentioned how a lot of the different employers, like the programs that they have to initiate and implement in their systems, in their hiring systems, to be able to attract those veteran employees. And so one question that I had was, how is that translatable for, the military community with, someone like, if they're looking at a company, how can they identify whether or not those systems are in place so that they know which organizations that they should align with?
Yeah, absolutely. And this again speaks to the veterans out there. I'll couch the answer to Sean's question and a list of things that, in order to be most successful, and I'll define success as finding your optimal career field, full employment in your optimal career field upon leaving your last duty station. The first thing, and it's obviously self-serving, but for those of you that haven't seen my first book, Mission Transition, please take advantage. It's most, again, yes, it's self-serving, but the fact is it's the most awarded book of its kind, and I would encourage you to read it 18 to 24 months ahead of your ETS. Utilize all of the resources that are for free for life for everyone on my website. Check out MatthewJLewis.com. And within there, you're going to see advice such as make sure you secure an internship. Most of you hopefully have access to SkillBridge, which you can take advantage of. within your last 18 months on active duty. Work hard, make a good impression, and even if that SkillBridge internship doesn't result in an offer, that's still a valuable experience. Anything you can do to get boots on the ground ahead of time is going to be valuable. Make sure you self-identify in your new organization and take advantage of your tribe. So specifically to Sean's question, make sure you network. Reach out again well before you actually exit the military. Understand who the individuals are, either directly within that organization or perhaps in that industry sector that can speak to indirectly the nature of what goes on within that organization. So pick their brains. One of the critical things you're going to want, which is further down on my list here, is to get a pulse on what the culture actually looks like within the organization. Culture might be a new word, but it's one of the key exercises I focus on in the book. If you break down culture into its various dimensions, and in the book I contrast the various components of a military culture vis-a-vis two different types of corporate cultures, I'll use that term. One more larger, more bureaucratic, one more smaller, more entrepreneurial. And oddly enough, the military culture in some ways mimics more closely the smaller, more entrepreneurial nature or culture in those sorts of organizations. That exercise is probably one of the more difficult ones you'll need to do, but will probably have the most direct impact on your tenure within that organization, your ability to assimilate within that culture. And so how do you get a beat on that? Again, network is the thing. And I, again, talk you through exercises in the book, various ways you can network. I realize networking as a word, as a term, tends to take on a bit of a negative connotation in the military. But when you look at what networking actually means in the real world, it's intended to be mutually supportive and not just, as we might say, kissing someone's rear end to get ahead without ever actually having earned it. That's not the way that networking works properly in the real world. So in short, that's it. There's plenty of other advice I could offer, but at the risk of moving on, Sean, I'll leave it at that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your book, Mission Transition. I noticed in it there were a lot of exercises in there for transitioning military, and quite frankly, it could be useful for veterans as well. If you had to boil it down, which do you think that are more critical that our audience should complete for them? And I mean, I know you kind of touched on a couple of these, but if you could tell us about which ones you think that are more helpful for, our audience.
Yeah, sure, Sean. Thanks for highlighting that. First of all, the book was purposely written in what I'll call a crawl, walk, run, step 1, 2, 3 sort of a manner, very much akin to what you experienced in the military, how you were trained in the service, such that you should be able to take implicitly to the way this thing is laid out. Read the chapter, do the exercises, come back with your learnings, and then move to the next one. It's kind of the way that it's laid out. So
pretty simple.
And every chapter is built that way. But to narrow down, to answer your question, I'll call out 5 kind of key exercises I point to. One, very importantly up front, you'll see this across the first couple chapters, is what I call the self-discovery sequence. And the self-discovery sequence kind of consists of, I'm cheating here, it kind of consists of 3 exercises. The first one is understanding your personal strengths. So we have you do an exercise to identify what those are. These are the things that really make you feel alive, that make you want to get out of bed in the morning and do what you do. If you had to work for free and do ABC, XYZ, what would that be?
Motivation.
There you go. So we plug into that first, and with that nugget, we add on what we call personality tests. There are many out there, and people have probably taken some. I encourage folks to take 2 so that they get kind of positive confirmation of not just their personality type, but how that personality type relates to your strengths on the one end, and then relates to a potential career field on the other. So with your strengths combined with personality tests, that can then give us pretty solid direction on what career fields are going to be optimal for you. So that's kind of first key exercise. Again, I kind of cheated there with more than one. The second is all around, resume building and skills translation. In light of understanding the profit motive of most commercial organizations today, you got to understand and get comfortable with the purpose of these organizations is going to be very different from the purpose of, obviously, the commands that you served and the flag that you served in the service. But if you can get beyond that understanding, then it becomes an exercise in how do you translate what you've done into something that resonates with the civilian hiring manager in those organizations. And I provide a number of resources and walk you through exercises on how to do that. Next one kind of picks on our last question, Sean, all around networking. Understand what its different purpose is in the real world and how you actually go about doing it. It's a pretty simple sequence. One is simply identifying who your network is, who that consists of. And there's an exercise with a series of concentric circles to identify who you know, and then identify who they know, and then who that third person knows. All told, then, once you understand that, you can identify who your networking targets are and put a plan in place to go and actually build upon your existing contacts. So networking, two more. There's financial exercises. You'll find them for free on my website, which, again, MatthewJLewis.com. Tons and tons of content out there for free for life for everyone. Please take advantage. This is all about helping you. My publisher won't let me give away the book, otherwise it would be there. But I will point to some courses, both video courses and an e-course on my website. Again, yours for free for life. Please take advantage. Financial exercises are part of those resources. These will help you identify what your needs are, backing into those needs from what you're ultimately going to need to retire, understanding what your compensation and benefits look like in the military vis-a-vis what might be on offer from that prospective employer, understanding what your needs are, and then helping you negotiate the components of that package that you either need to ask for or can perhaps give back if you don't need certain components of what's on offer. And then the last one we've already spoke about with your last question, that whole cultural mapping exercise, and get a finger on that pulse any way that you can, because it's such an important determinant of your ultimate tenure within the organization itself. John, I'll pause there with that, and I know we're running short on time. I just want to point our audience to, again, those courses, because we didn't have time to get to the slide where around the civil military divide. It is important, veterans, that you understand the nature of that and the challenge that it's going to represent for you. You can find it in slideware, both on my video courses as well as in the e-course, all out there for you for free for life.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Gabby agrees with me. You just provided so much valuable information, and to have that resource of your website, that is incredible. And so we're definitely going to put that link in the chat for, MatthewJLewis.com, so that if you are interested in looking at, all the free resources that are available for you and to you, for the rest of your career journey, that would be awesome. Gabby, what are your thoughts?
No, I apologize for any technical difficulties. The Wi-Fi here does not seem to be agreeing with me, but I can't wait to look into the mission transition, because if all these nuggets of wisdom have been being pulled from this book, I need to get the whole shebang and read through this from the exercises. Someone even just in my position who has a great career and who's well and settled, just these exercises really spoke to me and seems like something that I could do just to get some personal growth within myself from the day to day. So the mission transition is something that I'm honestly super interested in looking into. And not only that, but I'm very excited about your next upcoming book to be published in September, Hiring Veterans. Correct, Matt? I'm very excited about this as well. And this is in September, correct? That this will be coming out to the public.
Labor Day, exactly right.
Labor Day. Fantastic. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us again and providing us with this wealth of knowledge. I'm sure our audience, I know I speak for myself, but our audience as well gained so much knowledge today and hopefully can take this and apply this to their lives and their transition as well. Was there any last minute parting words of wisdom that you'd like to leave with us?
Thanks, Gabby. Thanks, Sean, for having me. Really appreciate it. Anything I can do to help those employers out there, those individual veterans that might be struggling with their transition, reach out to me via my website. Happy to do what I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for, again, for your providing your insight and your knowledge and your expertise in this. And I'm sure you have a lot of much more information from your journey transitioning.
Make this a repetitive thing because I love seeing your face here.
Yeah. So, well, thank you so much. This is RecruitMilitary Live. We thank you for joining us today, and stay tuned for our next show that's going to be happening in 2 weeks. And we hope you have a great day. Bye.